And so they publish a shock and awe series of reports, 5 consecutive days of pounding coverage, as Greenwald had planned it. In those first stories, we learn the NSA is collecting telephone records and emails of millions of Americans through a government-approved court order and programs like PRISM. For ordinary people, the idea of government surveillance is made real.
What do you think of Glenn Greenwald? He's made quite clear that there are documents that he's seen that he thinks go beyond where journalism should go. That he's drawing the line.
Right. And his qualifications for that decision?
He's a journalist.
Right.
So he's unqualified to make that decision?
I would say he's less qualified than the British, the American, or the Australian government, who have decided that they have a legitimate reason for keeping these secret.
My view of journalism is that the more people in power abuse that power, the more accountability and transparency they prove that they need through journalism. And so when I see a government like the UK barge into the newsroom of the newspaper with which I work and demand that they destroy their computers, something you would expect to hear in Iran or Russia or China, or when they detain someone they think is working with a journalist under a terrorism law for 9 hours and basically acknowledge through the media that they're doing it to be intimidating, that is a government that is attacking press freedom and abusing their power and showing that they need more transparency. And that's the role of journalism.
Yeah, it's harder to smash up a computer than you might think.
The paper, which had other copies of the Snowden files overseas, agreed to take an angle grinder to the computer while the intelligence agents watched.
I can understand why the President of the United States would say, you know, I was elected to this office, how come Glenn Greenwald gets to decide what's classified in America?
Yeah, well, unfortunately for that point of view, there's this thing called the Constitution, the First Amendment of which guarantees a free press. I didn't hear any liberals saying, how come whistleblowers took it upon themselves to reveal the Bush torture program or the NSA warrantless eavesdropping program or Abu Ghraib abuses, also things that were kept secret. And the reason is that part of our democracy requires that when the government keeps things secret, that the citizenry has a right to know.
To the extent that you have aided and abetted Snowden, even in his current movements, why shouldn't you, Mr. Greenwald, be charged with a crime?
I think it's pretty extraordinary that anybody who would call themselves a journalist would publicly muse about whether or not other journalists should be charged with felonies. The assumption in your question, David, is completely without evidence, the idea that I've aided and abetted him in any way. If you want to embrace that theory, it means that every investigative journalist in the United States who works with their sources, who receives classified information, is a criminal.